Hello and welcome back to the Priced Out Podcast, where we discuss issues surrounding housing in Marin. Today, we're here with Clark Blasdell, a nonprofit developer from right here in Marin. All right, welcome back and welcome to the NextGen Podcast. My name is Dylan. I'm here with fellow NextGener Kelly, and we are here with the great Clark Blasdell. Clark, would you give a little introduction? Who are you and how did you get involved with Marin Housing?
Okay. Well, currently I'm the president and CEO of North Bay Family Homes and the Suburban Alternatives Land Trust and Blue Star Family Homes, which is our veterans housing program that's in development right now. And I came to Novato back in 1974 to find out why my Volkswagen wasn't getting towed in from Berkeley and have his transmission replaced, and I just stayed here after buying the shop.
So what did you like about Marin that you decided to stay here?
What I like particularly about Novato, over the rest of Marin, was that it was a large city with no people in it. It's like 50 square miles and less than 20,000 people. And what I knew from being in San Francisco is that it was the same size as San Francisco, but less than 5% of the people. So it was pretty open and pretty nice, and everything's spread out a little too far for me, but I'm willing to help other people go vertical to get apartments that work near the transportation. And so I think some of the units need to be affordable, and the rest need to be high priced to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how did you get your start in building homes?
Well, it started out I would call it quite by accident. You meet people when you move to a new town, and you find out why did they decide to stay, what brought them, why they decided to stay. And so because of my Berkeley experiences, I was there when they started BART, and I started going to meetings about BART. Should it be underground and overground and where? And from those meetings of watching that process at Berkeley and BART, is that I just started going to meetings when I got to Novato because it took me 2 weeks to get my Volkswagen transmission fixed, so I was just walking around town. Mm-hmm. And so I started going to City Hall and watching what was being talked about. And what I was hearing even then, 45 years ago, was there wasn't enough affordable housing.
Wow, even 45 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, do you think that more people were going to those kinds of meetings back in the day, or would you say that the majority of the population of Novato was involved as opposed to now, or what do you think the relationship or the difference between the times is?
Well, having now worked in 5 counties and a dozen cities in the Greater Bay Area, the 10 or 9 counties and the 100 cities, is that in all of my experiences in all those towns, whether there are less than 10,000 people or over 500,000, less than 1/10 of 1% of the people come to the public meetings.
Wow.
And they usually show up on a particular day to try and stop something when it's about ready to go forward. And so going back 45 years, in my experience, I just started going to city meetings because I intended to stay. Mm-hmm. If I hadn't intended to stay, I wouldn't have started going to meetings every week.
Well, I think that says something that people show up at meetings when they're more against something rather than, in support of something. Why do you think that a lot of people show up and they're against new development in Marin as opposed to supporting that and supporting opportunities for young families and young people to be able to move out on their own, much like the older generation was able to?
Well, I think to try and find a succinct way of saying it is that most people that I've met in the dozen or two cities in the Bay Area that I've worked, and from Healdsburg to Hollister over the course of time, is that most people like things the way they are, and they have a hard time comprehending what this change that's being talked about tonight will result in their neighborhood if it's anywhere near where they live. And so as a developer of both rental housing and ownership housing, what I found most rewarding is when people say they opposed the project, but they were glad they were able to tell somebody in their family to buy early. One of the first ones. I mean, it's just, and now we have, in my experience, like 3 generations I've been working with people, and so it's their grandkids now are looking for places. And I would say that in every town, there are opportunities to become engaged in the public process for every subject that people care about. And housing is probably one of the single most expensive things for most people in their monthly budget and their life budget. And it's hard to comprehend how hard it is to get a new house built or a new door built. And sometimes I've spent as long as 15 years trying to get a permit. And a lot of people don't like to stay with stuff too long, but developers have to. And I'm a nonprofit developer, and I feel good about being accorded the thing of being a white hat developer. I'm not just in it for the money, but I know it takes a lot of money to make each door happen.
So you spoke a little bit about the barriers to actually building a house and developing.
Yeah.
Can you go into a little bit of detail? What issues do you, if you want to build some sort of housing in Marin, what sort of issues do you often come in contact with that delay the process or prevent you from construction?
Well, I think the thing that if somebody wants to just build a single family home, just one, not even a second one for somebody else in their family, is to find out what are the rules for this piece of dirt where I like this tree on that corner of this town. And if you don't go to City Hall and find out why that vacant lot is still there, don't buy the dirt. Because there's probably some reason why there's no house on it. As an example, in Novato, if you go up to San Marin Drive, there's a vacant lot, kitty corner from the grocery store up there. Mm-hmm. And that's where the old gas station site used to be. That sort of let gasoline go down the hill. And so it's been for sale for 20 years since they took the gas station out. But if you just thought, what a great site across the street from the shopping center in Kaiser, you'll be working on that site for quite a while. Mm-hmm. So it's go to City Hall and find out, why is this lot still vacant? Mm-hmm. Who tried before me, and why did they quit? Right. But then going into like what are the jurisdictional requirements? Novato is a low service. I'm talking about Novato, and all the other cities have different things, but Novato basically only provides police planning and pavement streets. The water comes from a different agency. The sewer comes from a different agency. The school comes from a different agency. So you have all these other jurisdictions that have the ability to encourage or discourage you about building your house at that location. Mm-hmm. And if you want to do up to 4, it's a little less difficult. And if you want to do over 4, it gets really difficult for the same acre.
Units.
Yeah, units.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that 4 units on 1 acre is necessarily enough to alleviate the housing crisis.
No. No, I would agree with that assessment on your part.
Right.
But there are so many entities and agencies that can have an effect upon what you want to do with your dirt, your land, whether you own it or not. I mean, as an example, I've been in the development business now for 45 years. And 15, 20 years ago, I just stopped buying land. I wait for somebody to just quit their land and take the research that they've already done as to why they can't build, mm-hmm. and then see if I can find a different group of investors that will work around the problems that were discovered by the prior builder.
Right. So you'd rather wait and watch someone fail, which makes sense, see which barriers that they have to overcome and fail in doing so, and then try to do it your own way and say, this is what you've done. Right. Well, I'm going to try to do it a little differently.
Well, you can learn a lot from failure of others.
Right. That's how you learn. Well, I think that a lot of developers have maybe learned that they don't want to build in Marin. I can say from myself and my experience at meetings that many developers are discouraged from coming here, and unless they have significant experience in the area, they know the commissions, they know the councils, they know the standards and the laws, they don't want to build here. So what has kept you building in Marin?
Well, I find it increasingly difficult every year of my life to build more units. But part of it has to do with the fact that, I came here before I was married and had kids, and each of my children, my youngest is now 31, and my older is 36, and for career reasons, they've each gone other locations to live. But my son had decided from his experiences in growing up in Nevada that he wanted to become a landlord. So when he got his degree in engineering from UC Berkeley, the first thing that he did is says, I don't want to rent longer than I have to. And he looked up every multi-unit property within a quarter to half mile of every BART station in the Bay Area. He said, I'm going to get to work by BART, and I'm going to look for a multi-unit property within a quarter to half mile of every BART station. And he did a research project, and within less than a year, he had located a property in downtown Oakland. Took him 3 different offers over 2 years, and then he had a 3-unit property.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And now he has a different 3-unit property in Berkeley, and he's only been out of college for less than 10 years.
That's pretty.
Like 7, I think he's been out, and he's looking for his 3rd property now.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want a single-family home. He wanted a multi-unit property where his friends and colleagues and people like him could be living close together, and he said he was willing to be landlord.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So he's done it twice. He's looking for his 3rd property now. And he graduated from Berkeley in 2011 with his master's degree.
Wow.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah,
to him.
yeah. But that's he didn't want to live in the suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to live downtown
Right.
with his friends where things are going on.
Do you think that he wouldn't be necessarily at the same spot in his life had he chosen to find a place in the suburbs?
That I don't know, but I just know that a lot of his friends have not bought places yet,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and so they've just agreed to be his tenants.
Well, that's pretty cool. That's a kind of smart idea. I think you do have to be careful though in terms of who you select to, occupy the spaces of your property.
Yeah.
Should you choose to be a landlord due to rental discrimination and all of that? I know that that's been a hot topic in Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
What have the changes been that you've seen in Nevada real estate in terms of rental discrimination and the laws surrounding that?
I haven't seen much of that, but I've watched fair housing in Marin from the very beginning of my moving here back in 1974, and I think fair housing of Marin, as an example, has done a very diligent job of particularly looking for overt and outright discrimination, and they seem to have been really good about testing. So if you think you're smarter than them, you better be careful. and I've watched them do certain sites in Nevada over the past 25, 30 years where we're just going to go test that place and see. And
what kind of testing are you talking about?
well, if 3 or 4 people go to a particular apartment location, project location, and they are told that it's vacant, and you send somebody else that's already a friend of somebody living there that isn't of the ones that get told no, they fairly quickly find out how the vacancies get created without anybody moving out.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a landlord, you just want to be really careful about that kind of stuff. But that's why I think fair housing Marin has done such a good job for most people and made a lot of the discrimination or anti-discrimination stuff work well in Marin.
I know that also just cause eviction has been a really hot topic too, kind of going along with that. I think that there's a lot more of the kind of social justice coming into the real estate market in terms of renters' rights. We see that there's a lot more proposed legislation on that end. It's interesting because it doesn't seem like this was a topic back in the day when you're talking about 45 years ago. Were there many renters' rights back in the day when you first came to Marin?
Yeah, so I just make the observation that, just in general, I've never bought my first home. I've been a renter my whole life, and I've never been evicted. in all of my years. And part of that, about knowing what the rules are and the requirements are of being a good tenant is always pay your rent on time, not on the 5th day of the month, which is the day you get fined by being late, and always take care of the property. And those are the two basic renter's rights: is take care of the property and pay your rent. And if you can't afford your rent for whatever reason, be careful who you let stay on your couch too many months.
Yeah, you can charge them rent.
Yeah.
Well, I think we find that, don't we? I mean, you hear a lot of people being crammed into one unit, and 6 people living in one unit because they can't afford to find a place of their own. Have you seen that at all?
Of overcrowding?
Yeah.
Yeah, like an apartment location that might be well situated or, if not underpriced, adequately, appropriately priced, is that you'll have 3 different tenants per day. One has the morning shift, the afternoon shift, or the night shift, and they all come home so they can eat and sleep. But some tenancies in some places have 3 different tenants, one of which is official.
Wow. So with things like this happening, where with this immense overcrowding, there must be some sort of awareness that there's an issue. There's a housing crisis in Marin. I mean, I think people are aware of it. So why, in the time that you've been here, why hasn't there been any sort of change? You even mentioned it's gotten worse. What do you think the reasons are?
Well, the overall reason. I mean, I'm an engineer by training, but I would say the law of supply and demand is that if you underproduce a product, the price will go up. And Marin, more than any other county in the Bay Area, has undersupplied housing for the past 50 years, seldom building half of what was needed or wanted, either one. And so a lot of the political forces in Marin have been more effective than most other counties of not having their regional obligations imposed and unable to get out of it, whereas Marin County perfected the art of saying no.
Right. Well, the regional housing needs assessment is a number that is come up with. It's figured by the ABAG, Association of Bay Area Government, and that is a great tool to kind of see how much each city and county is producing in terms of housing every year and what the rates actually are that we should be meeting. Right. Are you familiar with the RHNA?
Yep.
Yeah, and what do you find when you look at that?
Well, I mean, doing the arithmetic isn't difficult.
Right.
Doing the delivery under the arithmetic is. And when there was I've been in this career now for 45 years. For the first 10 years and then the 10 years following that, I read every housing element of all 9 counties.
That's probably not possible today.
Well, you can, because they're still produced by the same 10 consultants. So you can kind of tell which consultants are writing the housing elements for the general plans.
But it takes such a long time. I think it's a long, arduous task. When you think about the general plan and the housing elements and all that kind of stuff, there's so much to know. And I can't imagine as a developer trying to learn and retain all this information, especially with new laws being made all the time. How do you keep up with that?
Well, I stopped reading housing elements.
Yeah. Okay. There's your answer right there. Okay.
But the inference is to find out if I wanted to do a project in Healdsburg or back down in Hollister at this time in my life and career, the first thing I would do is find out who wrote the prior housing element and this housing element, and why did they adjust it based upon what facts or impositions or litigation occurred. And then find out whether the city in adopting a legal housing element, that city adopting their housing element, did they do it with encouragement or just to meet the law? And so you only learn that by first going to town and not be a developer. Try out the restaurants and say, is this parcel worthy of my effort? And if so, I'll drive to this town on a weekend night on a weekday night during the day and just see what this town looks like in the darkness and in the light. And then have a restaurant and ask questions. Go to a restaurant and ask questions like, what do people know about their, do they even know who their mayor is in the restaurant? A lot of people don't. In many towns. Do you know your council members? Do you know your trustees? I do all that kind of research before I even consider buying a piece of land.
Right, to see if the constituents actually see that it's worthy themselves. Right.
So that's like the kind of research that it requires to do well, especially when you make a project have a certain level of affordability. There are financing tools that finance affordability for apartments, condos, and different kinds of residential real estate. But the net effect is, what's this town like, and does it have a welcoming attitude at their Chamber of Commerce and at some of their civic activities? What do they promote? What do the kids come out to do? What do the seniors come out to do? When do they do it? Which days of the week? And, will this restaurant be here after I build my project?
Right, because commercial vacancies.
It's like looking at the whole town.
Right.
Yeah, well, you basically have to look at it for yourself and say, "What I want to live here."
And I want to live here.
Right, because you're not going to lie about it. Yeah.
Right.
So you mentioned the Chamber of Commerce and kind of, maybe City Hall even. Are these areas welcoming, and do they, what's the attitude in terms of their relationship with potential business and new housing? What have your experience been as of late with local bureaucracies and trying to build housing in kind of Marin, Sonoma, things like that?
Well, be careful about, the fact that I know all 12 cities a bit, and some of their geography and political constraints.
You can speak generally. I was just curious.
Is that many cities in Marin, because that's what we're talking about, is many cities in Marin are happy the way they are. And maybe 1 or 2% difference every decade is enough change to accommodate. And there are a lot of people, developers that I know, and the smaller you are as a developer, the less difficult it is to get your projects approved. But you still have to know the electeds, the appointeds, and the paid staff, and what their preferences are, which is different than what their prejudices are. And it's just important to know, once I get my project built, would I want to live in it? And if you can't say yes, don't do the project.
Right. Well, I think it helps to know the elected officials and know the people of Marin and, a lot of the laws and the attitudes people have about housing. I think that's pretty well known. But as a developer, I think that it's it's essential that you know what to expect.
Right.
So you're not just kind of booted out there and, a lot of people don't come back. It's interesting to think as a developer, which way do I build? When you have been working here for 45 years, such as yourself, what do you have to say about building out versus building up?
Well, I would say in general, building up is less difficult, except politically, because people don't want somebody looking into their backyard on almost every occasion. So one has to put an additional amount of detailed planning into having backyard views preserved around the edges of your property, of the new property you're going to develop, and then having meetings in that neighborhood before you apply to the city is very important. And have somebody in the neighborhood association call the meeting and know that before you submit to City Hall, after you've done the research about what City Hall might allow you to do, what would your neighborhood allow you to do?
Right.
Now, you spoke earlier about how a lot of these cities are happy the way they are, so to speak. But you also said that there's not that many people that vote necessarily or are civically engaged.
Well, voting and civically engaged are two different things. Okay. So I'm not going to City Hall for any reason, much less just to oppose the project. Right. But do you have a good and active community organizations, plural, besides churches, things like Boy Scout, PTA? I mean, they're often school-related activities. And how active are they in getting what the people who attend on a regular basis, are they getting what they want in the way of change at that school site or in that neighborhood?
Okay, so you think there would be more support for some sort of growth, some sort of level of affordable housing if there was more engagement?
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. It's just as an example, this week I was at a luncheon in Petaluma, and it's the North Bay Leadership Council, which is an organization that is currently headed up by Cynthia Murray, who's a former Marin supervisor and a former Novato City Council member. And at our table, Denise Athis, our new mayor pro tem, and Farhad Mansurin were sitting at our table. And at some point, Farhad said, well, Clarksville was my first home, so I didn't have to move to Sonoma when I was working for the county of Marin.
Yeah.
In an affordable house. And he says, and eventually I was able to get out of my affordable house and buy a regular priced house because I didn't have to sometimes wonder, could I get across the San Antonio Creek when it's raining?
That must feel pretty good to hear that you gave someone their chance.
Yeah, exactly. But and then he later went from county public works to being the director of SMART and making it run. And we were just talking about how you grow up over the course of time and have different experiences. And he said, yeah, well, I wouldn't be here if Clark hadn't sold me my first affordable home in Nevada, so I didn't have to worry about crossing the creek in San Antonio.
Yeah.
But that's like a 25 years ago story.
Yeah.
And he lives in, close downtown now in Nevada still.
Yeah.
But it's scary how relevant that is to today. I mean, I think all of us in this room know how difficult it is to, afford to live in Marin and the effect that has on your life. So before we close this out, I personally want to ask you, what's some advice you would give to young people in Marin and even the Bay Area as a whole in dealing and with navigating this housing market, and how can we live and save money and live in this county?
Well, so I just make this comment, first of all, about, to me, politics is the art of the possible, not the probable or most necessary thing, but it's the possible. And is there some part of your current life that would motivate you to put in 10 or 20% more effort so you could live on that side of this town as opposed to this side of that town, and find who appears to have the most influence about saying no, and who might have some influence about saying yes, and spend some time in a place where you aren't currently living, looking at strangers and dining in their restaurants to hear what's being said in the morning, in the noon, and night, where people go to eat. I mean, I do so much research by just going to restaurants.
That doesn't sound bad.
That sounds like fun. I think millennials can get on board with that.
How do you say so? A lot of times I just go to a town and say, would I want to work in this town? And what are the people like breakfast, lunch, and dinner and weekends in this town? Do I want to move here besides the geography and the distance? Would I want to move to this town, and what would I do when I got here? And, when I think about, if I were for any reason to have to leave town, and I was told that I had to go live in North Dakota, I mean, the first thing I would say is, gosh, all the houses are cheap, 5 bedrooms for $100,000. Why? Well, it's because it's where all the fracking takes place, and you have to have a snowplow for 6 months of the year. And so what that the houses are cheap, you got to start with those 2 points about this state.
Right.
And so then it's like, well, how does the Rotary work in this town? What's the library like? And just do a, like 2 days of research and eat at 6 different places.
Right.
And
It's good to know your community before you settle down.
Yeah, exactly. Is everybody here a stranger, or are there 3- and 4th generation families?
Yeah.
And then where they come from. before they got here 4 generations ago. So that's the kind of stuff that I do wherever I go.
Yeah, hopefully we can see the number of generations in Marin increase, and we can see, you can see your grandkids maybe live here if you wanted them to live here, and our parents could see us live here if we
Well, it's
wanted
just like
to.
with Hamilton. I started working on Hamilton back in 1975, right after I moved here from Berkeley. And if you look at just the neighborhood of Hamilton, there are roughly 2,200 new homes and less than probably 1,000 jobs out at the hangars in the peripheral locations. But when we did the original sale and the original rent-up of both the high-priced homes and the affordable homes, is that the neighborhood looked like a mixed neighborhood from San Francisco in terms of the ethnic diversity of the buyers and the renters. And if you go out to Hamilton at any particular time, and I drive around at least once a month for no reason other than to see who's keeping up their cars and who's keeping up their yards, and what's the town look like 15 years after it was finished, pretty much finished. It's like what things are being displayed in the windows and why. And so are people really happy with their neighborhood? And I just find so often that it's that way, and occasionally I still go to the Hamilton Beso Bistro. It's had 4 names, and I've been going that place since since it started. And people come up to me, and they'll recognize me from 20 years ago.
Wow.
Clark.
That's cool.
Because I spent so much time out there, and we got the place built and balanced in so many ways.
Right.
Wow.
So you see the sense of community is still there.
And sometimes they'll say, I want you to meet my grandson from Iowa. He's out visiting.
Cool.
So I have that satisfaction of that, less than a square mile out there with all those homes and those jobs and those locations and things that make up that town.
That's probably why you love your job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a neighborhood within a bigger town.
Wow.
So I get so much satisfaction from my work, just to know that people are raising their second and third generation here with some of the efforts that I put in 40 years ago.
Well, I love that you said that to let people know that developers do have a heart. Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah, I think people have the image of like, oh, the developers coming in to build up my town, when that's not the case whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you know what, Clark? Thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to add at the end here?
I don't know if I could add much, other than to say I'm really pleased to see NextGen doing what it's doing. I mean, I heard about you guys 3 years ago when you first got started. I forgot exactly the first meetings that I went to, but the fact that you are keeping up your efforts to inform others then in the community and out of the community about how important it is for young people to get engaged in a variety of ways to make the town a little bit different, perhaps 5 or 10 years from now, where you can see your efforts into results.
Right. Definitely. Well, we appreciate that. Thank you for coming today.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks for watching our podcast, Priced Out. To learn more about housing, check us out at nextgenmarin.com, subscribe to our mailing list, and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you and have a good day.